Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur. And Scott, treat me gently. I'm a little more sensitive than I used to be.
I've always thought you were quite a sensitive soul, Cam.
It's so true. So true.
We've got a great film to talk about this week, but before we get to it, usually we'd induct a Spy Hard's Die Hard at this point in the show, but because of our recording schedule, we haven't had a chance to get any more reviews from you all because we're sort of doing a few back-to-back. So I thought I'd open up the discussion with a question.
Okay.
Cam, I love pizza.
Right.
Do you love pizza?
Where is this going, Scott?
I'm just hungry.
Okay. I understand.
We're all hungry. I'm curious. Someone asked this question to me recently, and I couldn't come up with a great answer straight away. I had to have a think about it. And I've got a couple of answers written down, but I want to hear what you have to say. All the James Bond actors walk into a pizza restaurant.
Okay.
They are their James Bonds, of course. Roger Moore is not Roger Moore. He's Roger Moore's James Bond. What pizzas are they ordering?
Connery's getting meat lovers.
Yeah, he's got to be a meat lovers, right?
Yeah. Roger Moore, I something playful. I don't know. Pineapple. He likes pineapple.
Hawaiian is what I wrote down. Like, I feel like he's a Hawaiian, right?
Yeah, I think so. Pierce Brosnan, I think maybe some more like vegetables on there.
Why vegetables?
I don't know. I feel like he's just kind of like, he eats a balanced diet.
See, I have a different answer, and I'll bite back on this one. I'll take a bite out of your pizza if you don't mind.
Okay.
Pierce Brosnan is like the safe bet. He's everyone's Bond. He's right down the middle. He's a little bit of everyone, right?
So pepperoni?
What is that? It's pepperoni. He's the safe bet. You order a pepperoni wherever you go, you're going to get an okay pizza, right?
Right.
Pierce Brosnan is a pepperoni pizza.
Okay. Is like Timothy Dalton like anchovies?
He's something aggressive.
Yeah.
It's
and not everyone likes it.
No. Yeah, so yeah. But I didn't write that one down, but he's definitely like anchovies or like a tuna.
Okay, and then like Lazenby, was he invited?
He gets one slice.
Yeah, he gets. Lazenby. I'm trying to think of like what's his.
What's
thing?
a really emotional pizza?
He gets on his pizza are all the toppings that the women were eating at that clinic.
Oh, okay. So you got chicken on there.
Chicken, bananas, rice, a few other things. Yeah.
No wonder he got thrown out after one slice.
That's
no
right.
one's eating that pizza.
That's right.
They banned him from the pizzeria. He's a real one-slice guy. Well, that leaves Daniel Craig.
He just pours like alcohol on top of it, and he'll eat anything.
Barbara Broccoli takes it away from him because he wants him to keep his perfect abs.
That's right. Yeah, that man is not eating any pizza.
He is not allowed to eat pizza. The last, I mean, I will just throw out for silliness. What are David Niven and Peter Sellers getting? Peter Sellers leaves before his pizza arrives.
He orders it and then runs away because he thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
David Niven is very old school. So he's not even eating pizza because it's one of those foods that he's not too sure about.
Well, I had him down as a classic, but I had him down as a margarita, the original pizza. Like just the cheese and pasta sauce.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds okay, yeah.
Yeah. Like, pretty plain, but like it still works.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's like, and while he's eating it, he's like, I'm living on the wild side.
Look, I'm having a pizza.
And Roger Moore's like, ooh, a pizza.
Huzzah. And this is what happens, folks, when you don't send in a review. Let that be a lesson to the rest of you. But thanks for indulging me. If you have different answers to the pizza question, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. But Cam, let's give the people what they showed up for in the first place. And no, it's not a slice of pizza, although I am hungry now. Let's get to the review. Now, Cam, before we get to the movie that we're looking at this week, we have to introduce our very special guest. Joining us on our adventure to China and places far beyond is a man, a myth, a legend. He is a writer and author, and he is a spy movie aficionado. It's Mr. Steve Kobrin. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Scott. Hello, Cam. Nice to see you guys. I'm a big fan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great to see you.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I want to talk about the book you've brought out, The Man from Belize, in a little bit. But before we get to that and before we get to this week's film, this is your first time on Spy Hards. And whenever we have a guest for the first time, we kind of need to check their spy credentials.
Yes.
Just to make sure they're up to snuff sort of to talking about the films.
Okay.
So I suppose, you've written a book about sort of spies and espionage, but where does that love of spy movies come from for you?
Okay, so I think it probably all starts with 1977 because born in 71. In 77, I was 6, had my first exposure to the world of Bond. Spy Who Loved Me was the film in 77. So that probably was where the love of the genre, I guess, essentially was born. But then I sort of started kind of veering off into other kind of spy jinx type directions. I liked a lot of non-Bond spy films. I think that probably, I know this is an odd choice, and I think it's something that you guys on occasion or maybe all the time ask of your guests. Funnily enough, as much as I love the Bond films and as much as the Bond films really were the pivotal source of inspiration for the book, I probably would say that my all-time favorite spy film is actually John Schlesinger's Marathon Man.
Ah.
I say it with a slight degree of discretion only because, and I know it's something that you guys touch upon sometimes, not all the time. I have to say it that way because it's my favorite spy film. It is in no way, in my opinion, the greatest spy film. I think the greatest spy film is Hitchcock's North by Northwest. My favorite spy film is Marathon. Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit like Scott, who would say that Remo Williams is his favorite spy film.
Scott, is that true? Is that really your favorite spy film?
I just love dodging bullets. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Who doesn't want to climb the Statue of Liberty? That sounds like a lot of fun. I know, but I get it though. That I am the same. I mean, if you ask me like what's my favorite Bond film versus what's the best Bond film, they're very different.
Two different things.
100%.
I totally get that. Yeah, I mean, for me, if we just for a minute address the whole world of Bond, for me they're completely different. I think that I think that the greatest Bond picture is From Russia with Love, but I think that my favorite Bond picture is probably Thunderball. And I totally 100% agree with the way you guys have broken down and assessed Thunderball in the past, saying it's like kind of like the lounging Bond picture, like the kind of like relax with your friends type Bond picture. I agree 100%. But it is the one that I kind of seem to revisit the most, despite the fact that I think that From Russia with Love is the best one that's ever been made. But yeah. So yeah, favorite and great, practically never the same.
Hey, Cam goes back to A View to a Kill all the time, so nobody's perfect.
No.
Do I really?
No, but you know what's funny is that I'm kind of with Cam to a very large degree because kind of talking about the Bonds themselves, I'm with you, Scott, in that I think that Connery is the greatest Bond ever without a doubt. But my favorite Bond, because he was my Bond growing up, was Moore. I mean, as I say, my first exposure to the world of Bond in general and in the cinema was in 77 as a 6-year-old with Spy Who Loved Me. And then afterwards went to see every single Moore Bond picture as it came out theatrically and then all the other ones that followed. But yeah, no, I guess we're proving a point here that favorite and greatest, they hardly ever coincide.
Which they may or may not be words that we use when we describe this week's film.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting to me that the glory of The Spy Who Loved Me wasn't overshadowed for you as a young kid by Star Wars.
100%, because as much of a Star Wars fan as I am, my sort of love for Star Wars, unabashed though it might be, it kind of has limits because you guys have probably heard this before. I'm one of those Star Wars people that only like the first 3 films. Once we get past Return of the Jedi, I'm done. I'm done. It does nothing for me. I'm not that interested anymore. And that's basically that. But no, I mean, I think that if you were to ask me at that time, and certainly as a very impressionable movie-going 6 years old, did Spy Who Loved Me in the theater impress me more than Star Wars did? I would probably say, yeah, it did,
Wow.
and it probably still does to this day. Yeah,
Wow.
no,
Hey, these things hit people differently.
they
They've
do.
both got their
They
fans.
definitely do.
I mean, there are Bond conventions and meetings around the world every year. There are Star Wars conventions every year.
Exactly.
And then there are sometimes Star Trek conventions, but hey ho, a little bit less than the rest. But then, okay, so that's sort of cementing your love of spy movies and Bond. Although I do know and I appreciate that your favorite and objectively best spy films aren't Bond films.
Are not Bond films. That's right. That's exactly right. And I don't know. I think that has to do with the fact. Well, it's twofold. Um, where Marathon Man is concerned, because uh, again, we're going back to directors. I mean, I don't want to get too much into that, but like for instance, my film collection is not arranged alphabetically by title; it's arranged alphabetically by director.
Ooh.
So that's how my films are arranged. And so for me, John Schlesinger was a world-class director. I think he was one of the great directors. By the way, I'll digress for one small second here. I'll say that I agree with you guys that where Schlesinger's other foray into espionage, Falcon and the Snowman, is concerned, kind of like you guys, I was not that crazy about that film. It is what it is. But where Marathon Man is concerned, there was just so much pedigree behind that film. It kind of starts with the fact that it was written by one of my favorite writers, William Goldman, who was kind of a sort of a source of inspiration to me, very influential to me growing up and kind of wanting me to become a writer. And also just the fact that it showed the rawness and the darkness and the danger of the whole world of espionage. And I think that spycraft was really very cleverly handled in Marathon Man also. And I'll give you guys just a very interesting sidebar tidbit where Marathon Man itself is concerned. His last book, Goldman's last book, was a book called Brothers. And the character that Roy Scheider played in Marathon Man, the character of Scylla, who's Hoffman's older brother, who is basically the master spy. Well, in the film, it's kind of alluded to and certainly implied by what Olivier does to him at the fountain, that he basically is gutted, very savagely gutted, with that kind of like that spike that Olivier keeps hidden inside of his trench coat. But the book purports the idea that in fact the Scheider character did not die.
Mm.
That the Scheider character was basically taken to a secret hideaway, and months passed, and he was treated, he was healed, he came back to life, and then he was recruited for an ultra dangerous mission to ostensibly save the world. And I really kind of hope that that material, especially because Goldman's no longer with us, I hope that Brothers sees the light of day, because it would make an extraordinary film. Um, where North by Northwest is concerned, I just think it's the greatest, because I don't know if you guys have ever mentioned it, but I've always felt that that movie, North by Northwest, that is, I kind of almost see it as the precursor to the Bond films.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, I do. I know. Some people I've had that conversation with, they kind of don't get that, but I say no. It kind of is, because it's ticking off so many boxes that the Bond pictures traded in so profusely as the series evolved. I mean, the globe-trotting aspect, the femme fatale aspect, the very sort of I have larger plans for world domination aspect in the form of the James Mason villain character.
The
The
lifestyle.
set piece, the lifestyle, right? The set pieces themselves seem extremely expansive. And then I just can't get over the whole idea, and it would have been so great, but I kind of get it that it didn't happen. The fact that, and I don't know if you guys know this, but that Cary Grant was in real life was very good friends with Broccoli, and I guess they talked about well, let's have him do Dr. No. But then they say, well, wait a minute. If we go with Grant, it's going to be a one picture deal. It's going to be a one and done, and he's going to be out of there. So that won't work, and it can't work because obviously, as we know with Bond, you've got to be not only of a certain age, but you've got to be willing to go the distance and at least consider the idea that you're going to be recruited for anywhere between 4 and 7 pictures. And with Grant, that was never going to happen.
No.
Well, I mean, on that sort of subject, you
Yeah.
know, they say that Goldfinger is the blueprint for Bond films.
Yeah.
But they got the pencils and the paper from North by Northwest.
Right. Exactly. I 100% agree with that.
That's where it comes from. Visuals,
Yeah.
like the visual language of Bond is from that film. A lot of it, anyway. They did come up with their own stuff. I'm not saying that they've just harped on Hitchcock, but it is where it comes from. Go back and have a look.
Yeah.
And you speak about influences.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, you know, you've got a book out, The Man from Belize. You're writing about spies. Why did you choose to do that? Why did you choose to sort of put pen to paper and write a spy story?
Well, you know, it kind of stemmed, there were a couple of motivating factors behind it. I spent a lot of time in school writing short stories that eventually evolved into wanting to pursue screenwriting, which I did, and, you know, got some recognition. You know, you enter these screenplay contests, you do well, you get to like the quarters, and in a couple of 3 cases of mine, you get to the semifinals, but you're still just kind of pushing along because, as I'm sure you guys know, the whole notion of screenwriting and the industry itself is extremely competitive, where the whole writing angle is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a couple of friends come to me who are also writers say to me, you know, Steve, the other thing about it is that when you write, you're very detail oriented and very visually oriented. You should really consider the possibility of kind of like exploring another facet of writing, which is doing a novel. And our mutual friend, you guys and I, our mutual friend, Bruce Civilly,
Mm-hmm.
Bruce is my publisher. He was really the one that was imploring it upon me, I think, more fiercely than anybody, because he'd read some of my material and he said, no, Stephen, not only your love of film, but your love of the spy genre, you should kind of consider kind of creating your own world and not do it as a one and done, but do it more as something like could maybe have longevity, could maybe, you know, go the distance, God willing, maybe become a series. And I said to myself, you know, one thing about it is that the great thing about, you said, Scott, what was it about writing a novel that was intriguing? It was the idea that there it's kind of like it's free form, it's, you know, no limitations as far as like, oh, am I focusing too much on inner monologue? Am I focusing too much on art direction, locations? You know, the very sort of specific cues that I render when I establish an action sequence, when I do a fight scene, a shootout, when I do a love scene. I like to get very, very into the nuts and bolts of every quote unquote set piece that I write. And I realized that in a novel, I could do that.
Mm.
And I could do that, and I could be unhinged, and I could not have, you know, somebody looking over my shoulders saying, oh, I have these notes. No, 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 no. This is the way I kind of envision this world. And so, in answer to your question, the whole reason of wanting to pursue the conceit of tackling a novel was born out of A, wanting to explore with the medium as a writer, but B, wanting to hopefully create a world in my favorite genre that could perhaps, hopefully, have longevity. So the good thing about it is that I'm tied right now after Man from Belize. Bruce has basically already signed me to do a trilogy, so it's going to be at least 3 books, but hopefully there'll be more.
I will continue Cam and I's effort to be included in a spy story. So if you want to include a very inept Canadian and British spy in the background, they get blown up by an explosive shoe or something like that, it would be very much appreciated and very on brand.
Right.
Maybe like the Q branch room or something, where we get folded into a sofa or something.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there is a kind of quartermaster of sorts in The Man from Belize, and he's definitely very, very greatly inspired by Desmond Llewellyn, both in look and in attitude. So, yeah, you never know.
Well, you've teased us now. There's 2 more on the way, so look out for that, folks. But we'll come back to the book towards the end of the chat. But I think it's about time we took a seat, Cam, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we are tackling 1969's The Chairman, starring Gregory Peck.
Yes, that was where that seat pun came from. Thank you, Cam. And it's an interesting one to talk about. So I think for those who haven't ever heard of The Chairman, or as it is also known in some other places, The Most Dangerous Man in the World, you may have heard it under that title. Here is your synopsis. The Chairman. If the Red Chinese don't kill him, a computer in London will. It's already more exciting. Okay. An American scientist is sent to Red China to steal the formula of a newly developed agricultural enzyme. Now you're selling me on it, aren't you? What he is not told by his boss is that a micro-sized bomb has been planted in his brain so that should the mission ever look likely to fail, he can be eliminated at the push of a button.
Boom.
Quite literally.
Yes, literally.
Well, I suppose the next question is past connections. Had you ever seen this film before? You could reasonably bet I hadn't seen it, so I'll pass on that question. But I'll throw to you, Steve. Do you have any history with The Chairman?
I do, and I wish it was a little bit better than it is. So I have not only a myriad of issues with this film, but
spoiler.
I have I have a very, very strong connection to this director, and that's why it kind of pains me a little bit that we're delving into this particular film in his filmography. But J. Lee Thompson is, in my mind, the best post-war British director that there was. There are many. He is my favorite. I have, without exaggerating, 24 of his films in my collection. So I'm a big, big fan. I happen to have The Chairman in my collection. So when you guys reached out to me and said this is the film we were going to discuss, it's ironic that it's a film that I have, but I remember, I'll tell you what my history with this film is. I did a blind buy of this movie only because it was a J. Lee Thompson film. Literally the only reason.
Sure.
Saw the movie the first time, was sort of ho-hum about it then. Watched it again with the commentary, which is a great commentary, I have to say. It's by the gentleman over at Cinema Retro magazine. They do the commentary on the Blu-ray. Their sentiments kind of echoed my own, so I was like, okay, I'm not alone here. And then after that, I left it. This was 3 years ago. So I hadn't seen the picture in 3 years. So I've seen the picture now a total of 3 times. What stunned me was that I made incredibly copious notes on this film. And in both the pro and the con section, because there's just so much to unpack, I think, with this movie. But, I mean, I don't know. The interesting thing about it also is that Thompson has they had a very close relationship with Peck. This was actually the 4th of 4 movies that they made together. This movie, The Chairman, was their final picture together. And the interesting thing about it is that Guns of Navarone was their first. So I think that they kind of, they absolutely peaked with the first one. And the other, they kind of gradually kept going down in quality. Although after the Guns of Navarone, they made Cape Fear, which is an awesome film.
Yep.
And then they made kind of an interesting, what I would call kind of what they used to label a super western, called McKenna's Gold, which was made the same year as The Chairman. And then after McKenna's Gold came The Chairman. And I know we're going to get into all of the things we like and the things we don't like, but I have to say that when I saw this picture, I was sort of dumbfounded at how the MacGuffin of the movie was something I was hardly able to sort of put my arms around. The whole idea of Mao, the chairman, kind of. I really, I'll be very candid with both of you guys. I really had a hard time just flat out understanding it. The whole idea of taking the world's food supply hostage through this enzyme that only this scientist can kind of like steal a sample of, and it made it kind of made my head spin a little bit, and I'm just sort of watching it awestruck, and I'm put it this way. When what I'm deriving the most pleasure from this film is watching the Arthur Hill character who plays Shelby, his handler,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at him and saying, you know what? The eye patch and
Yep.
the eye, no, you guys maybe know where I'm going with this. I'm looking at him and saying, okay, the eye patch, Peck has the little kind of bomb device planted in the back of his head. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? One of my absolute all-time favorite films is John Carpenter's Escape from New York.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken has the eye patch. We've got the bomb planted in Kurt's head. He's got only a certain amount of time to rescue the president and get him back to safety. I'm thinking, did Carpenter watch The Chairman and like maybe get that, not obviously not the narrative, but did that plot device maybe kind of slightly possibly influence? Because if it, because I'm telling you guys right now, the thing that I derived the most pleasure from this movie was making the Escape from New York connection. So I know we're going to dive deeper into like the specific pros and cons, but that definitely was my initial takeaway after this recent revisit.
Well, you might have just blown this film wide open with that. I never made that connection. But I think we might dive back into that in a little bit. And in terms of the in terms of the chairman's plot, I in my notes I'll just spoil it before we get to my thoughts.
Yeah.
I just wrote like Goldfinger's plan, but boring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Cam, I will just write to you. I assume you hadn't seen this before?
No, I've watched a lot of Gregory Peck films, and I remember this one popped up on Disney Plus a while back, and I was like, nope, hold off on that one until we do it on the podcast. And then when we actually went to do it on the podcast, it was no longer on Disney Plus.
And it's important to say, actually, it's available on Disney Plus basically the world around, except for in the UK.
And Canada.
Oh.
But it's on YouTube, luckily, folks, so you can catch it on there.
Okay. Yeah.
If you haven't, of course, purchased the physical media. But Cam, I am very interested to know how we got this chair, man.
Okay, so this started as a screenplay effort from a writer named J. Richard Kennedy. This man was fascinating. He had 28 occupations, including novelist, record exec, publisher, manager. Wow. He was also the partner and writer for Harry Belafonte. This guy was a Renaissance man, and he basically came up with the idea of this, and he was an employee of the Communist Daily Worker newspaper, and then over time he became a hardcore anti-communist and believed that Martin Luther King's civil rights movement was infiltrated by Soviets and Chinese. So there's sort of like a mix of beliefs there that at a certain point changed, and he really was sort of inspired by this idea and decided to pursue it. And he had a couple writing credits. He'd worked on 1948's To the Ends of the Earth and 1955's Susan Hayward drama I'll Cry Tomorrow. And then he really just rolled into The Chairman. He didn't have a huge Hollywood career. He was too busy doing 28 other jobs. But in 1966, he went to Sinatra Enterprises and started writing The Chairman as a project for Frank Sinatra, Yul Brynner, and Spencer Tracy. And that went nowhere. And so he just decided instead to turn it into a book. And the book is actually what caught the attention of producer Arthur P. Jacobs and got the film ultimately rolling.
So it was a script, then a book, and then a script again.
Exactly, yes.
It's interesting.
Okay. It's an interesting filtration process. You wonder what gets lost in translation when it goes through 3 evolutions like that.
Kind of just tagging along what Cam was just mentioning about Jacobs bringing the project to fruition with Fox, is that there's a lot of pedigree behind this movie. And it's not just Thompson at the helm, and it's not just, I mean, Jacobs, he was, no slouch where a producer's concerned. I mean, this is the man that basically produced the Planet of the Apes films.
Mm-hmm.
And the Planet of the Apes films are like, they're outstanding, outstanding movies. And, the writer, not the gentleman that wrote the novel, but the I'm very familiar with his work. The gentleman that actually adapted the novel, a writer named Ben Maddow, he wrote a John Huston film noir called The Asphalt Jungle, which is like one of the great film noirs of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote The Asphalt Jungle. He wrote a couple of really great movies for director Anthony Mann. You've got I guess we'll get into it as we go more into the things we like about the film, but you've got Jerry Goldsmith doing, I think, a very evocative, interesting score. It's actually, the Goldsmith score is, to me, one of the real pluses of this movie, but it's just amazing how when a film like this has so much pedigree behind the scenes that you end up with the final film that we ended up seeing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that once it was, snatched up to be turned into a movie, that they didn't get J. Richard Kennedy to adapt it back.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yes, as you mentioned, Ben Maddow came in, and he'd started his career in the late 30s, and his first major film was a 1942 pro-union drama called Native Land, and went on and did things like Asphalt Jungle that you mentioned, which he got an Oscar nom for. He did The Wild One, the Marlon Brando biker film, the Burt Lancaster Western, The Unforgiven, and this was his follow-up to the Kirk Douglas Western, The Way West. And he'd have a long career. His final film was a 1971 horror film called The Mephisto Waltz.
Right.
Yeah, with Alan Alda and Jacqueline Bisset. Jacqueline Bisset, former guest on the show. We didn't ask her about that one.
No. No, but yeah, very accomplished writer, terrific writer. But yeah, you kind of just wonder where it all went. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and Ben Maddow is basically tackling this material from the opposite side, whereas Kennedy became very anti-communist. Ben Maddow leaned to the left and said ultimately, because he was interviewed about this, and said, no, this was just a job. He was not injecting any sort of personal opinion in this whatsoever. And he said he knew nothing about Mao when he made the movie, and he noted no one else did either.
Is that a lack of passion I sense in your screenwriter?
Or is it just like, he has the material, turn this into a screenplay? Okay, can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I've done plenty of assignments in my life where I've been like, yes, okay, I've been paid, thank you, here you go, and that's it. We all understand that, but
oh yeah,
we're here to kick the tires a little bit, so I have to kick it once in a while.
I remember in journalism school when I had to write regional politics stories, and I could not have cared less, but did quite well at them.
Right.
And of course, you're a massive fan of Chairman Mao, so it really ruined your writing.
Obviously, I've got the books right behind me here. And the director, as we noted, J. Lee Thompson, who was an English director and started off initially as a writer in the late 30s and had an early play he wrote adapted into The Price of Folly, and then did a few more writing assignments, and then in 1950 wrote and directed 1950's Murder Without Crime, and did a whole string of movies, including 55's An Alligator Named Daisy, 58's Ice Cold and Alex, and then the big one, The Guns of Navarone in 61, which he got an Oscar nomination for. And then, as we noted, worked with Gregory Peck a few more times. And this film was the follow-up to McKenna's Gold. So it was kind of like I've got another project. Gregory, you available? Let's go.
Exactly. Right.
It sounds a fruitful partnership by the sounds of it.
Yeah. And Thompson worked a long time. He went on and did 2 Planet of the Apes movies. He did Conquest and Battle, which were the last 2 entries in the 5-film original Planet of the Apes series. And then he did in the 80s, a lot of Charles Bronson and Chuck Norris films. He had a very long career.
And you're a big Planet of the Apes fan yourself, Cam, I believe.
Yes, to my right is a poster that says, Go Ape, with all of the movies listed, yes.
Awesome. He was just very, very dynamic, very bold. He's a very versatile director. It's why I have so many of his films. Funnily enough, my introduction to him was the exact same. I think it's relevant to talk about Thompson for sure.
Yeah.
I had the same kind of, I guess, introduction to him as I did to the world of Bond, because you were saying about the Cannon films that he made with with Bronson. They actually had a very fruitful relationship, those two. They made 9 pictures together. And 1977 was their second film together, and probably my favorite of the 9 they made, the picture called The White Buffalo.
Mm.
And that movie came out almost around the time, if I remember correctly, as Spy Who Loved Me. And so it was just another very sort of large scale, Dino De Laurentiis produced, I guess you could maybe call it Jaws type ripoff, like Jaws on land.
You're speaking my language.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was absolutely great, that movie. And um, that's what really sparked the seed of interest for me, not only with Bronson, but with Thompson. And so I kind of grew up on the movies that he made with Bronson, saw all of them in the theater, uh, including all the Cannon films, and then went in reverse and started discovering the older films, the Peck movies, um, Ice Cold and Alex, which is a terrific film. Um, did a couple of really good horror movies in the 60s. One with David Niven, really good David Niven film called Eye of the Devil. And then one with Maximilian Schell called Return from the Ashes. He was kind of like, he was referred to erroneously, and I think incorrectly, as not only a workhorse and kind of like a journeyman, but a jack of all trades and master of none, which I think is a little bit degrading because I don't see it that way. I think he was just a gentleman who was very well versed in not only picking his scripts for the most part. I know we're talking about the chairman now. For the most part. And he really did extremely well, I think, with a variety of genres while kind of exploring theme to a certain extent. And it was just the way he tackled the material. It was the approach that he had, to me, always felt very modern for a gentleman of his age, certainly of his generation. I mean, we're talking about a man who actually was a year older than Orson Welles. But yeah, it's a fascinating career, to be sure. And I just prefer to look at the chairman as just an inadvertent detour into strangeness.
Mm. And I know that Tarantino has cited J. Lee Thompson as a director that he really admired too.
A lot. Yeah,
so,
yeah. Absolutely.
Definitely got fans out there, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the chairman, the production for the film was a bit of a headache. They were unable to film in China because it was at the height of the Cultural Revolution there. And so they created elaborate sets on the Pinewood lot and then struggled to fill them with Chinese extras because they struggled to find any. And so then they went to shoot in Hong Kong, but the government canceled filming. So they ended up shooting guerrilla footage from cabs and cars to kind of have interstitial bits that could work into the movie, and moved the production to Taiwan and filmed ultimately the finale of the movie in Wales.
That does track for Wales. That's very much the rolling hills of Wales right there. But,
and you are going to recreate that yourself and crawl under a fence, right?
I'm there right now. I'm actually halfway under the fence.
And as you noted, Scott, the movie opened in London as The Most Dangerous Man in the World. So that's its alternate title. Mm-hmm. It had a budget of $4.9 million. Domestically, it did $2.5 million. So the chairman didn't stay the chairman for very long. He didn't hold that title.
It wasn't the most profitable film in the world.
No, he was not. No. And the top 3 for the year: number 1 was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Number 2 was The Love Bug. And number 3 was Midnight Cowboy. And notably, number 11 at the domestic was On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
I was going to say, we've been to this year a few times before, haven't we?
Yeah, not a lot, but it's kind of like that point where the spy craze is starting to die out, which maybe speaks to the chairman's box office. If you'd opened this movie in 65, it might have done huge, right? Or 66, but 69 might have been a little too late.
Or at least better, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you have like Midnight Cowboy on that list, showing like the way that Hollywood is starting to go. So, movies like this maybe felt a little old-fashioned at the time.
Well, it's kind of like it's right there on the cusp of when the new Hollywood began to emerge.
Yeah.
And so I think that interest in in this genre was definitely the waning process, you could say, was for sure starting to take full flight. Yeah.
Which is, of course, why we started our spy movie podcast in 2020. Interest was dead by that point. Perfect time to relaunch a podcast.
Exactly. And the only final note I had on this was that actor Conrad Yama reprised his Mao role in a Hausen's TV commercial advertising shirts. And he also did a theater production in that role. And he does play ping pong in that. You can actually look up the commercial on YouTube, and I watched it.
Wait, so, are you sure it's not the same actor just playing the same role twice? It's not the same Chairman Mao. There's not a continuity here between oh, Gregory Peck just left the room. Anyway, about laundry detergent. Let's talk to the kids at home.
No, it's not like that. It's Comrade Yama made a thing out of playing Mao in multiple different little projects.
Okay, fair enough.
Interesting.
That's that kind of casting you get in those days.
It's like the guy that played Charles Manson on Mindhunter, and then in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, taking it back to Tarantino.
All right.
I'd never made that connection.
Yeah.
Wow, there you go.
Is a thing.
Well, folks, it's time we head over to the House of Elegant Pleasure. And dive deep into the waters of the Chairman. Steve, you are our guest. You are up first. Looking at this film in 2024, what do you think of the Chairman?
I think that this film is really, as I said earlier, completely all over the map. Like I said, I don't get the MacGuffin, the whole thing about the chairman wanting to take the world's food supply hostage. I don't quite get how that works. I know there's a very elaborate kind of prepping sequence where Arthur Hill, the Shelby character, kind of explains it. No matter how many times I backtracked that sequence, it was all gibberish to me. I really didn't get it. But for all the kind of supposed knocking that we're doing, there actually are some things that I like about the picture. The first of which, again, I'm kind of bringing back sort of a slight Bond connection here. I don't know if you guys noticed that as the picture begins after the Fox logo, there's actually a very interesting title sequence that had, for me, almost kind of like a slight Morris Binder vibe to it. It was not a conventional credit sequence at all. The graphics were very unusual. I think that he was trying to take visual representations of what was going on during that period and kind of bring it to the present while kind of wrapping up or doing kind of a brief summation of the country's history and why things were getting sort of on the verge of becoming very dangerous in that part of the world. And then by the time we get to the actual opening scene with the flight to Hong Kong or wherever it is he first descends, that's kind of, it's strange because that sequence in the airplane also, that was another thing I really liked about the movie too. I liked the fact that his assignment is kind of conveyed to us, the exposition is conveyed to us in flashback. And it was sort of splintering the timeline a little bit, which I thought was, and that felt to me like more of a Thompson thing. That didn't seem scripted to me. It was more trying to take what was on the page and trying to present it in a way that was more interesting for the viewer. And I kind of almost felt for a minute like I was watching a Nicholas Roeg movie. The timeline kept getting fractured. We were going kind of backwards, forwards, discovering not only him getting the assignment from Arthur Hill's character, but the relationship with Anne Heywood, with the wife. I'll get into that. Her character also.
I wondered, honestly, just speaking about that jumbled kind of timeline, I wondered if that was they found the pace was too slow in the first half and did that to try to make it feel a little more urgent.
No, you make a good point, Cam. I think that probably had a lot to do with it. It might have been something like maybe tinkering in post and saying, you know what, let's kind of spruce this up. Let's give this kind of a little bit of a jolt of adrenaline, because the way we're presenting it now in kind of like a linear fashion, as it were, it's extremely dull. So let's see if we can do something to sort of enliven the proceedings, and maybe that'll help. And I think it does help, at least where that opening section is concerned. Like I said what I said about the title sequence. The other thing that I really liked was I liked the fact that you had somebody there like Anne Heywood. Okay, this is a pro and a con. I have to say, I'm going to kind of throw them both at the same time. Who is a great actress of the period, a great actress. I felt that her casting was uber smart. I always thought Anne Heywood was smart enough and charismatic enough and gorgeous enough. She could have been a Bond girl. Could have been. I think that that role is so underwritten, it's almost criminal.
It's barely a role.
It's barely a role. It's barely a role. And I asked myself, why did they even bother? And then I said, from a writer's standpoint, I said, okay, you know what? If you're going to introduce her, fine, but then at least do something as the narrative progresses where maybe we can reintroduce her. Something I would have loved to have seen. Obviously, they didn't do it. But something I would have loved to have seen was getting her involved with that very lackluster action climax at the end with the mines going off and the wires and all this. But getting her involved before then, where he's running for his life trying to get to the border, wherein maybe you reveal her as perhaps having been in alliance with the organization, or what I would have preferred was something like maybe the Anne Heywood character is revealed at the end as being a saboteur of sorts. At least do something with the character. If you're going to present her, then at least kind of like that writer's notion of setups and payoffs. If you're going to set her up at the outset, don't make it be so dishwater dull where we're basically just saying, here's Peck's wife, here's him saying goodbye to the wife, and then here she is at the end receiving him, kind of like there to say, I'm here for you, and the past is the past, but I'm here to stay, and we'll make it work regardless. It was just something that it sounds like I'm kind of knocking it because I'm trying to say the things that I like. I like her, and I like the fact that they cast her, but I think it was a missed opportunity because they just did not give her enough to do. Now, the other thing that I was going to say is this, keeping in the whole subject matter of things I liked. I don't know if you guys, I'm keeping it in the espionage realm. I don't know if you guys were fans of the Jennifer Garner show Alias.
I never actually watched it. I'm not a big TV guy.
You didn't? Okay, I'm not either, but I'm a very big Jennifer Garner fan, and I love that show because I felt that of espionages or shows that were kind of like toying with the spy trade in the 90s and in the 2000s, Alias was far and away the best one. Just as interesting footnote, it is a J.J. Abrams show, Alias is.
Mhm.
And he was making it around the same time as he was doing Lost. But let me tie it back to the chairman. The reason that I took great pleasure in this aspect of the chairman was because Rick Young, the actor, who in the chairman, this is early in his career, he was, I believe, in the chairman billed as Eric Young. He hadn't become Rick Young yet. He was the one that kind of played Mao's second in command.
Mm-hmm.
And in Alias, he had a really great role who, as I was watching the film, I said, the character that Rick Young plays in Alias really seems like this character 35 years later. So for me, it was just hearkening back and tying to a show that I have very deep affection for, Alias, and saying, okay, that's a plus. You guys have Rick Young here. He's doing his thing, and that's all good. And then the other thing that I kind of wanted to ask you guys, because this to me feels conceptually like could have been the crowning set piece in the film. But then they approached it, and I don't know if this was a Maddow thing or a Thompson thing, or maybe it was in Jay Kennedy's book. I don't know. The ping pong game.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the ping pong game, and I'm saying to myself, I don't know if this sequence is being played for laughs or not. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
Mm.
I'm watching the sequence, and I think that it's supposed to be generating tension and suspense because while they're playing, Mao is sort of laying the groundwork for what the master plan is and what Dr. Hathaway, what your role is going to be in where the bigger picture is concerned. But because they're playing ping pong, I don't know if the idea behind that is to sort of deflect the immediate tension of the moment, or to maybe in some crazy way augment the tension. Because it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I wasn't sure what I, as the viewer, was supposed to be focused on. Am I focusing on the game, or am I focusing on all this exposition that's being laid out as they're playing ping pong? So conceptually, I like the idea of the ping pong game as sort of like a battle of nerves and a battle of wits, but I wasn't too sure about why it was handled that way. But I don't know. That was kind of like for me the major set piece, because once we get to that climax with the wires and the landmines, it all becomes very sort of lackluster to me. But yeah, I think that's, and I think I mentioned before, Goldsmith's score was top notch. I love the way the Goldsmith score had kind of like these very evocative, kind of like Asian motifs
Yeah.
ringing throughout. Very, very immediate, very, very sort of and he was, and it, of course, he augmented the suspense with his cues towards the end. Another issue, I don't know if you guys really noticed this, the thing about Peck. Okay, Peck as a man of action is a very strange thing to watch.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying this as somebody who absolutely adores Gregory Peck as an actor. I really do. I really mean that. But you watch Gregory Peck most effectively and most movingly in pictures like To Kill a Mockingbird, and in pictures like Hitchcock's Spellbound, and in pictures like 3 O'Clock High, where his gifts are really brought to the forefront. Because I feel that when you turn Gregory Peck into a man of action, it becomes a little awkward. Because I don't know if you guys noticed at the end, the running to free, the run to safety, the run to get to the border. This is not him doing it. You can tell he is being doubled. He is being doubled, I'm going to say, what looks to me throughout almost the entire sequence. And, I don't know about you guys, but the spy genre as a whole is a genre that trades on action and in action sequences very sort of liberally. And I like my spy thrillers to have, bravado action set pieces, but I like them to also be executed with a person in charge who actually, you're feeling it because you're with them, because that's them doing it. And I think that the more cerebral aspects of the character, I think he's great casting where the scientist portion of the Hathaway character is concerned. When we get to the whole notion of, okay, now we're going to have to turn Peck into this man of action, it became a little bit not off-putting, but it didn't seem to have the same sort of naturalism of buying the character in the same way that you bought Hathaway the scientist. You turn Hathaway into this sort of like quasi-Bondian figure towards the end, and it's just weird. Maybe with somebody else playing the part, maybe, but with Peck, no. And again, I have to really, really augment the whole notion that I love that man as an actor. I have a lot of his films. I love him in Guns of Navarone. But the thing of it is, the difference is this. In Guns of Navarone, which trades in espionage also very liberally, also a J. Lee Thompson film, Guns of Navarone is an ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
So in Guns of Navarone, we have the luxury of being distracted either by Tony Quinn or by David Niven or by Stanley Baker, so that we're not uber focused on only Gregory Peck during those, large caliber moments of action. Whereas in The Chairman, he's kind of like, he's our guide throughout this entire picture. And, I don't know. I think I went off on several tangents there. I was trying to say the things that I liked. I think I kind of did, but yeah, I guess that pretty much is where I stand, where the things I like are concerned. Yeah.
Well, let me jump in on that, because if we're going to talk about Gregory Peck, and I'll weave that into my thoughts, and I'll throw it to you afterwards, Cam, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
Because it does kind of tie in to what I think about this film. And one thing I noted down several times is how much it reminded me of a Hitchcock film that we covered last year on the show, Torn Curtain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
and how much we in our review lamented just some poor casting choices. Paul Newman being specifically one of the ones I pointed out as being the wrong man in the wrong situation. And I think Gregory Peck is also the wrong man for this situation. I think the premise of this story is great. The idea of sending a spy on a mission with a bomb in his neck, if it goes wrong, you can blow it up at any time. I think that's you've got yourself a good recipe here. But unfortunately, they didn't put it together very well. And, I didn't think I'd be entering a film where I'd be seeing Chairman Mao play ping pong, but I mean,
I think that scene is supposed to like undercut his threat, right? Like he's taking part in this so that no one sees him as like potentially dangerous. It's like he's very genial and fun, but it is weird having this whole double talk scene where he's like, well, you would be thinking this, and then I would be, and I'm like, wait, I can't even keep track of what you're trying to communicate right now because you're doubling this up with ping pong.
Well, I was like, I even wrote in my notes, like, I started quoting Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads. I was writing down, you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, playing ping pong with Chairman Mao, and you may ask yourself, how did I get here?
Right.
And I was, because it just came out of the complete left field, and it's crazy. I will say the trailer for this film is great, but yeah, it's a great premise.
The advertising is top notch, people.
Sublime.
Right.
It's the most dangerous trailer in the world. No, it's you know what? It's a great premise. I just think it's just something didn't come together in the end. I don't whether it's chemistry between Peck and the director. Maybe they didn't click. Maybe Greg was the wrong person for it. Maybe J. Lee Thompson was the wrong guy for the job. Maybe the guy who came in and did the rewrites on the script to make it a script again was the wrong man for the job. Just something didn't come together. And so you're left with just this boggy film that you kind of has an interesting start. I quite like the sort of pre-title sequence, and I quite like that exposition on the plane whilst the flashbacks is kind of an interesting way of telling the story. I really did love the film's side characters more than anything else. Shelby is one for the books, I have to say. Like, give me anyone with an eye patch.
Shelby is the best character in the film, without a doubt. Yeah, exactly.
He's the part early on where Gregory Peck's like, my wife died 3 years ago, and Shelby's like, well, these things happen.
But yes. Oh, wow. That's a real major Dobie over there.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yes, I think it just sort of squanders what it could have been. And it's one of those, there's always these films, Hollywood loves to remake films that are good and make them mediocre. Can't they pick films like this and remake this? Because this could be great in the right hands.
100%, Scott. That's like absolutely right. It's like they have this propensity, this almost urgent propensity to take pictures that were so outstanding when they first came out that it basically forces you, the fan and the viewer, to say, can't you just leave well enough alone? Because I'll tell you what, you try doing it again, you're not going to make it better. You're not going to make it better. And in fact, by making it worse, what you'll end up doing is tainting the reputation of the very awesome original. So I agree 100%, Scott. Take pictures that upon their initial release and their original conception were lackluster to begin with, because at least there's significant room for improvement.
Well, you mentioned Remo Williams earlier, Cam. Like there's like 100 Destroyer books. Make that a new film. Just redo it. It's been 40 years since the first one came out. Why not have another go? But speaking of 40 years, it's been a while since I've let Cam talk. So why don't I throw it to you, Mr. Smith? What do you think of The Chairman?
I don't know that my opinion is that much different than yours. Where I really came down on this was, I love the setup of this movie. I think it's fantastic. The whole bomb in the head thing, and having a character like Shelby overseeing this kind of beleaguered guy on a mission, that is a great concept. I really love the idea of dropping an agent in like China during a revolution. That's a time period we don't really tackle much on spy movies. You definitely deal with, like, say, Red Chinese agents in spy films, but not a moment like this where Mao is a major participant in the film. I think that is really interesting. And to have, Gregory Peck navigating this kind of world, I was like, tell me more about this. And some of the side characters really drew me into that. I think this movie has an issue, though, in that I think the spy mission sucks.
Exactly.
And ultimately, this is a spy movie. And so if I'm like, I like the setup, I like the world, but everything your main character is doing in terms of spycraft is uninteresting to me. That is a problem.
It is.
And I think the Gregory Peck issue is like, this guy, in this movie at least, is way too stoic and stiff. He just seems like someone who has been dropped in a pressure cooker situation and is not even breaking a sweat. He's kind of just strolling through this movie, and I think that is a big issue because this seems like it should be an incredibly intense situation. He should feel in danger at all times, and you never get that off Gregory Peck. He's way too composed. And it's interesting, I was looking up some reviews after I watched it. Roger Ebert wrote a review early on in his reviewing career, very early days for Roger Ebert. And he literally just wrote an entire, review just saying Gregory Peck is wrong for this role. And basically saying that over and over again. And that was about all he talked about. He didn't even talk about side characters, plot, anything like that. He just basically said Gregory Peck is terrible in this movie.
If Roger Ebert says it so, then we all agree with him. So it must be the case. But yeah, it's a real shame with the casting, and I think we'll probably come back around on this in dislikes. But I want to focus on the stuff that works about the chairman. Let's talk a bit more about our likes. Steve, you did sort of list a lot of yours, but is there one maybe you wanted to focus on, talk a little more about?
Well, I think that if I had to really kind of, punctuate something that I liked most about the film, it probably would be the idea that there was a really great sense of atmosphere that I think Thompson sets up, but I think unfortunately it comes in the first half. This is a picture that's very front-loaded. It's front-loaded with a lot of potential, just potential in general. But I like, for instance, when we have the walking sequence through the Chinese restaurant. And that was probably the best looking set in the entire film.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that the Peck character was being kind of like not taken to task, but he was introduced by this. She was really kind of like a hostess, I guess. And it looked to me for a minute, again, there's like these close calls. It looked to me like kind of like in the opening sequence with the airplane, where you have that great introduction and you have that great presentation of what the mission and the assignment's going to be. You have this really terrific sequence where it looks like she possibly might become into like this Bondian femme fatale, especially because she seems so infatuated just at the sight of him. But on the other hand, you know that she's working for the other side. And I'm saying to myself, okay, this is sort of a semi-Bondian trope here. I'm kind of liking this. And I mean, it almost kind of reminded me of that character in the Chinese restaurant. She reminded me a little bit almost of like the Rachel Grant character in Die Another Day. Little bit.
Right.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Just conceptually speaking about why she was there and what she could potentially represent. That was something that I like. I have to keep coming back to the idea what I like about this movie is the premise, the set pieces that it establishes, and the concepts behind them. Because invariably, the execution and the delivery of those moments fails to ignite my interest and fails to spark my attention. I love the idea of the ping pong game. Absolutely love it. I love the idea of the climax with Peck supposedly running for his life and running for the border with the mines going off and the whole thing with the tripwires. But again, this is something that worked for me conceptually. The delivery, Scott said it before, the execution of it is what failed to ignite. But this is like a movie that to me, especially the Arthur Hill, there's something that you can really latch onto. The Arthur Hill character and the Arthur Hill performance and just the invention of the Shelby character, it's awesome. I mean, you kind of feel to a certain extent that if you are familiar with Carpenter's Escape from New York, I'm looking at those two and I'm kind of watching the way that they're connecting. I do like the dialogue. I do like a lot of the sort of pungent, acidic dialogue in the barbs that are exchanged between Shelby and Peck, both in the office and when they're just communicating, via however it is they're communicating. It reminded me in tone kind of like the relationship between Lee Van Cleef and Russell in Escape from New York. You know, I'm
I
the
was gonna
type of guy
say.
that if I'm watching something that even if it's made before the fact, even if the picture that I love that I'm trying to make a connection with came afterwards, that's okay. That's okay. That's a pro to me. That's a pro to me. So I think that the planting of the bomb device in the head, the Arthur Hill performance, the whole physical makeup of the Arthur Hill character, the relationship between Peck and Arthur Hill, the ping pong game in theory, the concept of the ping pong game, and the Jerry Goldsmith score. Well, if I had to just make the list of the things that you really liked, that's basically it. Those are the things I really liked. Yeah.
I agree about the Shelby relationship. It reminded me a lot of the Harry Palmer Colonel Ross relationship in the Ipcress file, which
Mm.
is it does pain my insides to draw that comparison, but I did make it nonetheless. But yeah, I love that. That's the stuff that really works, and I think the sort of setup in this film is great. I just think the payoff is pretty terrible.
Very
I mean,
lacking.
you mentioned
Yeah.
stuff like, I said like the House of Elegant Pleasure at the beginning. I alluded to that, which is that scene with the sort of Rachel Grant-esque, the Peaceful Fountains of Desire
That's right.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a great setup, and there's like a guy he meets upstairs. It's meant to be this whole like, oh, I'm trying to lead you into this, show you how decadent Western society is, but never mentions it again. They built this whole elaborate set
No.
and don't do anything with it. There's no point to it, and it does that a lot of times. And then it sticks Gregory Peck's character in this, work site for 40 minutes at the end of the film until he scarpers off with a tank, which is the tank stuff's great, but there's like a 40-minute segment of him just doing science, which is just boring, to be honest with you. Like I can't jazz it up anymore. And but that's the thing. It builds this promise. You have a great setup, a great premise, like we say, but then just. But yeah, we're on likes, so we're focusing on the good stuff. I think the premise is great. I agree. Cam?
I really like that scene too, with like Tingling in his room, and yeah, not the most sensitive of names, but it was 1969, and you have that build up to her in the bedroom with Gregory Peck, and you're like, this works. And that set, as you said, was beautiful, wandering through that like kind of restaurant / brothel or whatever it is.
Right.
I'm like, this movie is pulling me in. This is what I want to see. And then you have kind of the build up to her luring him into the bedroom, and then the guy is broken in to like knock Gregory Peck out. And then it's just like, what do we do with this? No, nothing. They knock him out,
Exactly.
and he wakes up
Yep.
and it's like, well, my shoes are gone. And it's like, oh, okay, there we go. It just felt like great concepts that they didn't really have kind of the next step on. They were like, that's a great idea. I don't know how that matches A to B to C.
Right.
Cam, a like from you?
Well, for me, this is in some ways like a very complicated story to communicate to an audience, like the revolution in China. And I think one of the things that's so important is to have supporting characters that pop to kind of make this a journey that people can navigate. Because it is, in some ways, kind of a fluff entertainment. It's a 90-minute spy thriller. Like, it's just the kind of thing that a mainstream audience should be able to follow. And I think they did an incredible job populating it with interesting character actors. I thought that, like, for example, Kwouk, as the kind of older scientist that was an old, colleague of Gregory Peck's, who he's going to see. That guy, in just a few scenes, brings so much dignity and, like, inner torment to this character who feels very much caught between his kind of Western love that he's gained from studying or working abroad, but also, like, his pride about his homeland. I'm like, this guy is giving a master class in supporting character acting in a movie that really doesn't deserve it. And there's that scene where they take him away and he, is basically beaten or something and has the dunce cap on his head. And you're like, this is heavy stuff to see this happen to a character. And I'm like, Kwouk is just incredible in this movie. And there are a lot of performances like that. Even seeing Burt Kwouk show up as this agent who's going to pitch in at the very end to kind of try to help Gregory Peck. It's kind of an action-based role, but he brings so much to it. Like, this movie just has all these characters that the movie's not great at writing a compelling espionage story, but it is really good at writing small characters that you remember.
Yeah, it's chock full of them. Even going like slightly further out of the people that we mentioned, like Shelby, and you mentioned Anne Heywood earlier, the sort of love interest for the film.
Yeah.
I did note down she gets a real sort of Sophia Loren treatment from Operation Crossbow, where she's just there and then gone again.
Second billing.
Yeah, second billing.
Something like that. Right. That's a very, very good comparison. Yeah.
But like she's even on the poster, she has a picture of herself on the poster, but it's actually her headshot they use for the poster. It's not actually her in the film because she's in it for so few scenes. I wonder if she shot more and it ended up on the editing room floor.
Yeah.
Very possible. It felt that way. Like I say, besides having been an extremely underwritten role, it just seemed like having an actress of her caliber and not utilizing her properly was sort of like the apex of a missed opportunity.
That felt like a studio note to me. We have to have a love interest. That's why she's there.
That's most likely the case, and it has a couple of fun lines, like when he writes her a postcard and says, "Oh, I wish you were her," or something like that. That was
a good line.
That was a good line. But but what I said in my notes, I sort of wrote to myself, I kind of wish she was. If you're going to have this sort of framing device girlfriend or wife or whatever, I wish she was used more like Amy Ryan was used in Bridge of Spies. Where she's there supporting him for more of the story. Obviously, she can't go to China, but she could have been there at the hospital when he had the implant put in, and could have been there, like taking him to the airport to see him off. Just add a few more scenes just to add some more to their relationship together, instead of just dinner, a shag, and then the end, basically.
Well, there's a reason she was not mentioned in my likes in terms of supporting characters.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, just for me, a lot of the stuff I love has been mentioned, but the big thing is it's a very subtle Jerry Goldsmith score that I think works quite well. I'm used to the sort of big, brassy, bombastic Jerry Goldsmith scores just because of my love for Star Trek. But this is a different sounding score for him, and he's surprised me a couple of times in some of his spy movies he's done over the years. But yeah, one of the things that stood out for me was the music, and it's usually a damning thing on the film sometimes when I notice the music, because it means I've stopped noticing everything else. But I have a passion for Jerry Goldsmith, and that does come through. And the other thing, I think just the idea of the bomb in the neck is a really cool
is brilliant
plot device.
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised in 3.5 years of spy movie podcasting, we've never encountered this before.
It is weird, right? You'd think we would have seen it in some like 60s spy film at this point, but I guess this is so far the earliest example of that we've seen.
Yeah, we'll chart it. Maybe it'll appear in Spy Kids 6.
Yeah, I liked at the end when they were like, we had the scene of them actually detonating it, just to prove that it was actually an explosive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was actual tension to it, because there is that bit where they are seriously debating setting it off. And the execution of that with the timer didn't quite work, because there was points where I was looking at my watch going like, well, hold on now. This would have gone off long ago. But the movie did what it could to make that tense. And I actually liked there was the moment where Shelby is just completely denying to his colleague, no, there's no bomb, there's no bomb, there's no bomb. And the guy says, well, if there was, you could set it off right now and take out Mao as well as, Gregory Peck. And he goes, oh, yeah, interesting. And then quietly leaves the room and is talking to his superiors and like, if we did this now, we could take out 2 targets. Okay, no, okay, fine. But I thought that, like, frankly, Shelby is the reason this movie has tension to it.
100%.
No, Shelby is the man. If you said we're going to do a sequel but without Gregory Peck, it's going to be Shelby and a different spy, sign me up.
Yep.
I want him as the M. Yeah, put him in. I would watch that all day long, and I would also be interested to see if the bomb in the neck had like a different effect on a human when it's exploded. Maybe there's like a Kananga and it like inflates them and then they explode. Like what's the silliest thing that bomb could have done?
Well, I don't know if it's silly. All I'm picturing is the sad fate of the character Slipknot in Suicide Squad.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure Gregory Peck will be signing on for that film.
No, he would not.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red Alert Spy Hards, we are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, we are getting some serious hairdos and watching Melanie Griffith and Harrison Ford take on Wall Street with 1988's Working Girl. Is this rom-com good enough to take to the bank? We'll find out.
So don't get left out in the cold. Help support your favorite spy movie podcast and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, let's get back to the spy jinx. Well, let's swing on over to things we dislike, although we've charted a few of them already. Steve, something you want to highlight that you weren't too much of a fan of?
Yeah, well, you know what? Barring the fact that we've kind of, to a somewhat on a cursory level, touched upon the whole leading man problem and really what you would call kind of like kind of dubious casting, even though he's such an amazing actor. That's kind of like where the whole double-edged sword aspect of having Peck playing Hathaway stems from. Is, it's not like you're talking about somebody who's, mediocre to begin with. I mean, he's an Oscar-winning superlative actor.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea being that I think that he was one of these actors that really was best in a specific type of role in a certain genre of film. This is not one of them. There is something, though, that we haven't touched on at all, and it applies as much to the spy genre as a whole as it certainly does to this picture, and I'm kind of wondering where you guys stand on this. If you may or may not see eye to eye with me on this, but I felt it from this film deeply. And by the time the picture ended, I said, you know what? This is probably the most problematic element of the picture. Away from the whole miscasting of Peck, away from the whole great ideas that were there conceptually, i.e. the Chinese restaurant walkthrough, the ping pong game, the action climax, which to me, I'm sorry, is just so deadly dull. I was bothered by the fact that, considering the fact that this is a picture that's plying its trade in the spycraft, that unless I missed something, and I watched this film very, very carefully this last time around, I didn't find any plot twists whatsoever. Like, none. Like, everything that was happening was very sort of straight down the line. Here's the assignment. Here's what you can expect to have happen. Kind of ties in somewhat to what I was saying about what should have been done, in my opinion, with the Anne Heywood character. Being as underwritten as she was, okay, let's reveal her in a different way. Let's have her actually be purposeful, not only to the narrative, but to the resolution of this story. Let's switch the identity of her character. Let's have her allegiance lie somewhere else. Let's make her one of the villains. Let's make her an enemy. No, they couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So just for somebody who really kind of thrives on this genre as a whole and really loving the ones that do trade in plot twists as the pictures unfold, I found the fact that this picture had a veritable lack of any plot twists whatsoever, coupled with the fact, I'll go back to the other dislike that I had, besides that, the misuse of Anne Heywood, the miscasting of Peck. The other thing that really kind of bothered me was the fact that, the MacGuffin itself, for the life of me, I like the device, like both you guys have said, and I'm in total agreement with you. I love the device of the ticking clock syndrome. The bomb being implanted in the back of the head. You've only got so much time to get this done. Otherwise, we're going to pop your head like a melon. That's great. I love that. But the whole thing, and I just couldn't, I couldn't wrap my arms around it, very simply because I couldn't understand it. I mean, this whole thing about, an enzyme is created as a growth regulator, and it can withstand any climate conditions, and it can grow any crops anywhere at any season of the year, such as wheat, pineapple. I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck? I mean, am I sitting in a chemistry class, as a science class? This is making no sense to me whatsoever, and I don't feel the urgency. I don't feel the stakes that are involved, because you're just weirding me out with all this gibberish of a MacGuffin that's very simply I don't understand. I love the fact that you're creating an immediate sense of danger for the protagonist by saying you have this very specific designated timeline that has a time clock to it, and it will lock you down if you don't achieve this by X period of time. That's awesome. But the actual thing that he's chasing, the MacGuffin as it were, I simply don't get it. And that, coupled with the fact that there is a veritable lack of plot twists, the miscasting, there, I think I just kind of outlined it. Those are my takeaways as far as the things I absolutely did not like about this picture.
I think the only surprise the movie has is that the Kwouk character has smuggled the formula home with Gregory Peck in the Red Book. I think beyond that, there's nothing.
Right. And that is revealed at the end. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in with two things. And, Steve, you started by saying that we might challenge your dislikes. And I'm going to challenge both of them, but not in the way you would expect.
Okay.
You're like, I hated them more.
Yes, I detest them. In terms of the enzyme, I think you can fix that scene by having it be delivered by a lady scientist to Roger Moore. And then Roger Moore would go, an enzyme, how bountiful, while staring at her. Something like that. You write it that way, everyone goes, yeah, sure, enzymes, whatever. Let's get on with it. That's how you fix that scene. In terms of the twists, there are two twists that jump out to me that actually, these are genuine twists I think that are built into the script, but I think there is a reason why they don't necessarily work. The first twist is that his scientist friend dies from being carried on a chair, which could definitely kill us all for too long. That's pretty strenuous, being carried around on a chair all day.
Right.
With a dunce hat on, very strange choice. And then the other one is he sneaks into the camera and finds there's no film there. There was never any film. It was all a ruse.
Yeah.
Like, that's a twist.
Yeah.
But the reason they don't come across to you as twists is because you don't care.
Well, I made a note that the Seung Lee character, it's a Seung Lee - suicide by cyanide. Was that a thing? Did he die from that?
Yeah, he did kill himself. I was just being facetious.
Okay, yeah, I was like, it's been a week since I saw the movie, but I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But you're right, like, you can easily miss that detail, and it's a little confusing. So I do think some people might miss that.
Yeah, and you know what? Just to support what Scott said just now, because it really applies to just film viewing in general, and he's 100% right. If you engage with any picture, whether it's in the spy genre or any genre whatsoever, if you are not emotionally invested in the characters and the narrative itself, you will tune out. You will be so emotionally checked out that, as Scott said, even if the twists are actually presenting themselves to you, you will not notice because you simply don't care. And it's true.
Yeah. Well, there's the other, I guess, kind of reveal the movie has is the Shang-Chu character that they set up as this agent that will help him.
Yeah.
That, I guess it was a slight reveal. I don't know. It's the kind of thing that the first time I saw the movie, I don't know that it jumped out to me, but the second time I could see they were making it super obvious.
Right.
So I don't know if it works or not. Maybe it does work because it didn't necessarily jump out to me the first time.
And also you get to have Burt Kwouk throwing grenades.
Yeah.
Always fun. Always fun. I have a pretty big dislike that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think I'll go last. I'm going to see if Cam has it, and I'll let him have it. But otherwise, Cam, do you want to go first?
I think for me, like, a big issue with the movie is set pieces. And we've talked about, like, the final action scene of him trying to crawl under the wire and all that. And I was looking at that wire going, I think I could easily get under there. Maybe I should be a secret agent doing this stuff.
Well, he almost manages it. I'm like, just go a little further. You've got this, buddy.
Right.
And Gregory Peck was a big guy. Like,
exactly.
He was like 6'5" or something. I'm like, I could easily shimmy under that thing, those 2,000 volts. But
you and your 5'7" over there, chill out.
That entire action sequence just felt lethargic to me.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't. It should
was.
be like, this is the final race to freedom. You know, this should be Steve McQueen on the motorbike trying to jump the barbed wire. Like, hell yeah.
Absolutely. It should have been like high tension. Yep.
That one just falls completely flat. But we've kind of talked about that. So I'm going to talk about a sequence that really didn't work for me. That was also another set piece. And it's supposed to be incredibly tense. Mm-hmm. It's him breaking into the camera, like going in through the wall to get to the camera to try to steal the enzyme code. This is supposed to be like slow burn tension. And he is clanging around in this thing, and I'm like, there is just nothing. I'm watching Gregory Peck slowly take apart a camera, basically, with no real sense of danger. And it just feels like it drags on and on and on.
Well, just to preface for those who haven't watched it and are just sort of listening to the chat, what's happening whilst he's crawling through this vent system is, his character it's got a bomb in his neck, but it's also a transceiver. He's able to talk, and that whatever he's saying is being transmitted back to HQ, wherever that is. And the Chinese are triangulating the signal at the same time, trying to track him down and figure out exactly where he is in the building. So there is a ticking clock element. I understand that, but Cam is bang on right. He's just scrambling around in the dark, making grunting noises, which we've all done from time to time, but it's not for cinematic viewing.
And I mean, you have Sung Lee's daughter, who is loyal to Mao, who is a danger in the house. Mm-hmm. Like, there's ways to build tension there of her, like, cueing in on the fact that this guy is not in any way trying to be quiet and is, like, smashing through things. And you never have that either. There's never that moment of, this woman may be onto me. She's someone who's willing to turn in her own father to have him, like, publicly beaten. But the sequence just... They never, I guess, thought to have her be someone who could play an active role in stopping it.
It would have been a better use of the character. I think it would have made it a bit more interesting. I'm going to throw in my dislike, and it hasn't been mentioned. And that is the free pass that it hands to Chairman Mao.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
This is not presented as a docudrama. This is not presented as a factual statement. But I will just say, looking at Death Toll, Chairman Mao is probably one of the worst leaders in human history in terms of what he did to civilization. And the fact that he's having a jolly game of ping pong in this film whilst and then having tea with your protagonist and being all chummy, it could have spent a little moment to give him at least some sort of level of menace, or at least shed some light on some of the things he was responsible for. I don't know. I just feel like he's getting a free pass, even in films where we've had Hitlers and Himmlers in the past that have been in films, and even in like slightly lighter roles. What was it? What was the film we did a couple of years ago with the guy who played Moon Knight?
Oh, Oscar Isaac with Oscar Isaac.
Operation Finale.
Operation Finale, and there's like, is it Himmler or something in that film? It was one of the architects of the Holocaust, and I chastise that film for playing him slightly, wacky, but even that is quite restrained. This is unhinged in a sense of like letting him be this jolly uncle you see at a family wedding or something. He is not that man. Look at the history books. Now, this is the sort of thing that comes up a lot. Last year Napoleon had the problem of it being, holes being picked into it because it's not factually accurate. I completely understand if it's trying to move away from being factually accurate, but this film's tone, which we haven't really spoke about, at moments wants to be deadly serious, and at other times there's like James Bond level quips going on. Now, you can't really have your cake and eat it. So if you're going to present this like do or die situation where he is trying to survive in China, that's fine, that's tense, but then don't have Chairman Mao coming in doing cartwheels and high-fiving everyone.
Well, I mean, how much historical context would they have had in 1960, probably 8 when they're writing this? I don't know much, especially when you have the writers saying, I didn't know anything about Mao.
Well, okay, fine. If that's the situation, that's fine. But I don't know. From maybe that's just a 2024 perspective, me being, 2020 looking in hindsight. I don't know.
Maybe so, but like at the same time, that means the movie has not aged well, and it's those limitations that are holding it back.
I can't speak to what people knew at that point. I'm not a historian. I just know a little bit about Chairman Mao, but I don't know what people knew in 1969. So that's a fair critique of my critique, Cam. Well said. It's the first time for everything, eh?
Had to happen eventually.
Yeah. I think before we get to the knock list and wrap up, I'm just going to throw out to sort of any notes people have left. I do have a question for everyone, which I'll get to. But Steve, is there any sort of notes or anything about the film you haven't mentioned you want to bring up?
Oh, well, this is more of like a technical. This is one of the aspects that I think really kind of dated the film. I don't know if you guys noticed it. It's early on. It's when the Peck character is being swept away by that girl from the Chinese restaurant, the one that I told you kind of vaguely reminded me of Rachel Grant, Die Another Day, there was an effect that they used, kind of like a strobing effect, that was, I'm only bringing it to, like, it might not seem like a big deal, but I'm going to tell you why it was a big deal to me in the moment. It seemed like something I would have seen in the Batman Adam West TV series,
Mm.
because you may have noticed that he got knocked out in the back of the head, and they did kind of like this strobing lighting effect, which, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
completely took me out of the film. Now, if I'm taken out of the film because of some sort of, not a technical gaffe, but actually a creative directorial choice, that's not a good thing. Again, that's kind of a little bit nitpicky on my part, but being that I'm kind of realizing here that we've pretty much gone over everything insofar as the choice of the actors were concerned, the use of the actors, and really how the narrative as a whole was delivered and how suspense was very kind of minimally maintained, kind of brings up the whole notion of the length that Cam mentioned before, which is the fact that this is really actually only a 90-minute picture or around there. And yet to me, I actually did feel that it suffered from pacing issues,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the so-called set pieces, rather than propel the narrative forward, they seem to kind of all of a sudden bring the picture as a whole to a dead stop, because you're kind of frozen dead in your tracks trying to figure out what is the essence of what we're trying to convey here. Kind of dovetails back with what Scott was just mentioning, the whole idea of how are you portraying Mao in this thing? And, you're not tonally, you're all over the map. It's what I mentioned earlier about the ping pong game as a whole, that conceptually that was interesting, but as I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, I'm really not sure if this is being played for laughs, because I'm leaning more towards the idea that there's sort of a broad comical effect going on here, but I, as a viewer, I'm not feeling it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's kind of my final footnote, especially because that ping pong game was so spoken about when this picture came out, because, and kind of goes to show you guys the fact that we're talking about a spy thriller that is absolutely, almost completely and utterly lacking in bona fide true action sequences. The fact that they have to point to a ping pong game as being the quote unquote central set piece. I've read essays on this
It's
book,
different.
and oh, it's different. Yeah, it definitely is. It's a novel approach to, something that you haven't seen in a genuine spy thriller. But on the other hand, I don't know if it, not that it, I don't, not that I'm saying that it didn't belong, but how it was actually planted into the picture and ultimately delivered, that was the problem. I like the idea in theory, don't like the way it was handled.
Well, it's kind of the sort of scenes that in classic Bond films you would see, like Bond having dinner with the enemy or the bad guy of the film, and they talk about the plan and they have that witty repartee back and forth.
Right.
It just makes me wonder what the sort of Doctor No dinner scene would have been like if they were playing ping pong instead.
With Dr. No's hands, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, he's killer with those ping pong paddles. No, he could do your legs in.
Maybe he's got like a screw-on ping pong paddle. Hand.
Oh yes, he definitely has different attachments for his hands.
Yeah.
Oh, Cam, any notes for us?
Just a couple things. There was a moment that really jumped out to me of the ambiance of the control room when they are going to blow him up at the end. There's this guy that just walks in and is serving coffee to people. And I liked how completely nonchalant it was. It was like, to these people, this is just a day in the office. And I don't know like how intentional this shot was, but it really jumped out to me both times I watched the movie. I was like, what an odd little addition, and I love it. It's almost like a NASA scene or something like that. I thought it was great. And then the other thing, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't mentioned it, but it's about the character Shelby with the one eyeglass that's dark. All I thought about was the end of Casino Royale with the guy who gets shot with the nail gun.
Oh,
Right.
okay. It's some
Yeah.
sort of retroactive genesis of Shelby there.
Yeah.
It's funny how you make a great point. I totally see that, but I think the only reason I was harping on Shelby reminding me more of the whole Snake Plissken motif was because of the whole bomb in the back of the head, and again taking me
Yeah.
back to
Mm-hmm.
why this is reminding me of Escape from New York. But yeah, I mean, I think Shelby probably was my favorite character in the entire picture, precisely because he was reminding me of Snake Plissken. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, we're firmly behind Shelby here. This is a Shelby Hards podcast right here. This is we
Yeah,
are on board
100%.
for it. Yeah. Rename the episode, Cam. That's all we need. I had two notes. One's a note, one's a question. The first point is the note, and that is the Chinese people must think Gregory Peck's character is absolutely insane because he just constantly is talking to himself.
True. Very true.
It's like,
Right.
you got the guy hoovering outside his hotel room. All you can hear is Gregory Peck going, Operation Minotaur, blah, 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 blah. It's like, is this guy okay? Do we need to call the psych ward for him or something? What's going on?
Yeah, it's not like nowadays with Bluetooth where everyone sounds like they've escaped from a nut house.
Yeah,
No?
that's just doesn't fly in communist China. So I'm surprised they wanted to keep him in there.
Yeah.
And the last one is, we mentioned the ping pong game. We've spoken about it at length, but I'll throw the question out to everyone. Is there a historical figure you'd like to meet, and which tabletop game would you like to play with them?
Oh my god. Oh boy.
Oh, wow. You know, I think probably because I just loved the man for what he did. I'm actually, funnily enough, I think I'm not saying this for comic effect at all. I'm actually being very truthful in my answer. Um, I probably would have and you said tabletop game, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, I sincerely would have loved to have been able to play one game of chess with Abraham Lincoln. There you go.
Yep.
Great
That's
answer.
a good one.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's actually a well composed, straight down the middle answer. There's no comedy in there. That's actually something I would like to do too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go on, Cam.
I will take William Shakespeare and Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, so you're bringing him to the modern day. Well, you're reviving Shakespeare, so I suppose then it's not so much
Yeah.
of a stretch that he could play Cards Against Humanity.
He'd be great at it. He'd be a blast.
He would be. He would be great. Oh, this is tough now. I've got like a straight answer and two straight answers. Okay, that's gonna go for funny. I tell you what, I would love to meet and speak with Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, okay.
I think that would be absolutely fascinating, and I need to think of the longest game possible so I can keep talking to him for longer. So I'm going to play Risk,
Oh, okay. That's
Great
good.
choice.
That's good.
Great choice.
and also I can see the menace come out in him too, because he might get very malicious and try and invade all my countries.
I could see that.
And I'll find there's like a bomb under the table the whole time. It's yeah, it gets very Hitchcock. It's that would be a fun time, I would say.
Yeah, I think it would.
Okay, folks, let's not belabor the point. We wouldn't want our psychological status to go up to 100. Let's get to the knock list. Now, Cam, as we have a guest, please explain for the guest and our listeners, of course, once again, what the knock list is.
Yes, the knock list is our tortured acronym, of course, for the Need to See official classics of the Spy Hards podcast, where every week after we've talked about a movie, we determine whether it belongs in the pantheon of all-time great spy films. And some movies that have made the list include North by Northwest, Goldfinger, Dr. No made the list, as well as 3 Days of the Condor, and several others.
Quite a few. So the question is the chairman making the knock list? Everyone gets a vote, and that's how we decide. So, Steve, guests always go first. Yes or no? Is the chairman making the knock list?
This is not a knock list film, and it saddens me to say that for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which is what I've been kind of harping on throughout the majority of the podcast, which is my love for this director, my love for this actor. I think that the biggest takeaway that I'd have from this film is that it applies its craft very, very sort of, I'm not going to say artfully, but very sort of keenly. In other words, it wants you to know that it is a spy thriller through and through, but it's one of those missed opportunities of basically all filler, no killer. In other words, conceptually, this must have looked fabulous when it was first submitted. Just the general premise alone. but the way that it was executed with all of these potentially dazzling set pieces on paper, it just seemed like one missed opportunity after another, coupled with the fact that we had a very, very lovely leading lady who was completely and utterly wasted, I should say, and a leading man who, despite being one of the great actors ever, really was not appropriately cast for this film. So, with all that said, it's definitely, for me, it's a no.
Okay. That's one no. Cam, over to you.
Yeah, it's a no for me as well. This thing just has so many issues with pacing and casting and so many other elements. I will say this, though, it is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, there are interesting elements of this movie, and we have watched some things that just offered nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized a note that I forgot I want to wedge in here before we sign off of the show. Kwouk,
not allowed.
Kwouk, the actor who played Sung Lee, played the Japanese villain in Spy Ship, connecting it back to an earlier film. I don't know if you remember that, Scott. Yeah.
I do remember that film. Yeah.
Anyways, that film did not make the knock list, and I don't think the chairman does either.
Okay, that's
sorry, Kwouk. I apologize.
Sorry, Kwouk.
Right.
Yeah, well, there you go. 2 votes for no, so my vote doesn't mean anything, which is about right. But I'll state it anyway for the fact. It's definitely a no from me too. I think the premise was full of promise, but it didn't quite deliver for me. And you can put that one on the DVD cover if you'd like.
The 4K.
Yeah, the 4K
Right.
restoration of the chairman. But there you go, folks. 3 no's. The chairman is not making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Steve, thank you, sir, for coming aboard the show.
Thank you both very much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. If we're gonna have some links in the show notes below, people can go and click down there and find out more about the book. But just to get from yourself, where can people find out more about the man from Belize, and just maybe give everyone a little bit of sort of the premise of the book to know what they're going to find out more about.
Basically, you can get this on Amazon.com. You can get it either as a Kindle or, of course, on paperback. And it's, as I say, it's the first of what's going to be so far a trilogy in a series about a man who basically is a leading cardiologist in the world who has basically left the spy trade behind, but because of a series of secrets that he has had on his person and in his files throughout his professional career as a doctor, he is now being stalked and traced throughout the world by the powers that be, who gave him his employ both as a spy and as a doctor. So you've got people, organizations, very large-scale organizations working at cross purposes throughout the narrative, and it jumps all around the world, globe-trotting style, very much with the Bondian influence behind it. And yeah, if spy thrillers are your cup of tea, well, I think that The Man from Belize offers something that is kind of off the beaten path. It's been well received. It's getting really terrific reviews, and it's why we're working on right now as we speak on the 2nd and the 3rd novel back to back. The trilogy will actually be out and published by the summertime.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, that's basically where to look for it and what you can expect to get from it.
Well, there you go. As I said, there'll be links in the show notes below. And Steve, can people find you on social media at all? Track you down there?
Yeah, I'm at the Steven Kobrin on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook as well. It's basically Steven Kobrin / Man from Belize.
Wonderful. There'll be links to that too, folks. And make sure you click down below, find out more about the book, find out more about Steve. And Steve, thank you, sir, for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you very much, guys. I had a great time.
There you go, folks. That was our chat about Gregory Peck's The Chairman. Thank you again to Steve Kobrin for joining us on the show. Details of his books are in the show notes below. Don't miss out on that. But Cam, the question goes to you, sir. What are we talking about next week?
Well, I guess we are kind of closing off an unofficial China trilogy we've had on this show.
Okay.
Because we first tackled Jackie Chan's First Strike, Hong Kong Cop in Australia, right? And then we tackled The Chairman, which is Gregory Peck going to China. And next week we are going to tackle The Art of War, the 2000 film with Wesley Snipes, which is about sort of a trade agreement between China and America and the complications that ensue.
It's not really selling the film to me, Cam.
Well, it's an action film with Wesley Snipes, so you can throw in some kicking and punching and shooting in there as well.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm back on track. And yeah, I don't think we've spoken about Wesley Snipes so far on the show, though he does have a couple of spy films to talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about U.S. Marshals at some point, and there might be something else, yeah.
I think Passenger 57 is kind of like he's a undercover agent as well. Like he's a
airline. No, he's airline security.
Is he? Okay, maybe there's another one I'm thinking of. Something to do with something in the skies. It might not be Wesley Snipes though.
Okay,
I'll have to think about that. But there you go, folks. Wesley Snipes is coming to you next week. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us as we take a look at 2000's The Art of War. If you like what you heard on this episode, please consider joining us over on our Patreon, just sending in some support our way. Every penny, pound, dollar, cent counts. Helps keeps the lights on here at Spy Hards HQ. And we thank you all to our patrons that have supported us so far over the years. You are all Spy Hard diehards to us. Don't forget to, of course, follow us on social media at Spy Hards. That's SPYHARDS on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, you'll find Cam and I taking up residency at the House of Elegant Pleasure.